How's it going, all? I've got another Photoshop tutorial for you, and this time we're going to make something like the image you're seeing on the screen, which is a kind of spacey, geometric, abstract thing, which is kind of cool. You can use parts of it or techniques from it for backgrounds or for artwork in general. So let me just dive right in and show you how this is created. So what you want to do is create a new canvas. So File, New. And we're going to create kind of a high-res image. So this is going to be 10 inches wide by 10 inches tall at 300 dpi or 300 pixels per inch. Click OK. And let me zoom this out so you can see what we're going to do here. And let me make sure all my palettes are in order so you can see what's going on. All right. So the first thing we want to do is create kind of a textured background to work against. So we're going to use the clouds filter in Photoshop to do that. But the way clouds works is that we need a foreground and background color to work with in our palette. So let's go ahead and select a blue color for the foreground, and it's going to be closer to cyan, so kind of a mid-range cyan, and this hex value for this number is 004977. So click OK. Now select the background color, and let's simply take a swatch of the first color and find a darker version of that. So something around here, 00243B is the hex value, as you can see here. Click OK. And just so you know, I'm doing this in CS6, Photoshop CS6, but I can show you kind of another technique. For part of this, I'll show you a more manual approach in case you're in an older version of Photoshop. And I'm just using a mouse, no tablets or anything like that. So now with those two colors selected, go to Filter, Render, Clouds, and that'll create kind of this cloudy canvas to work against. So now let's go ahead and drag out a couple guides so we can find our center point. So go to View, New Guide, and make sure horizontal orientation is selected, and for position in the text field, punch in 50%. And then let's do that again, but we're going to select the vertical orientation. So View, New Guide, Vertical Orientation, 50% for the position. And we have guides to show our midpoint. Now let's go ahead and drop in our stock photo of a galaxy. And I found this one at Shutterstock, which I like a lot. It's got a nice combination of lots of stars and this nebula texture kind of running through the middle. So the link to grab this image is below, but also if you want to find variations of an image like this or other ones that come close, just do a search for nebula texture or nebula photo and make sure it's something purchased or something you have the okay to use. So let's go ahead and drag this out onto our canvas, and I'm going to zoom out a couple times to see this image, and it's a perfect square. So I'm going to hit Control T to bring up the transform bounding box, and I'm going to drag it to the center point here, and I have snapping turned on. If you make sure you go to View and make sure snap is turned on here. And now holding Shift and Alt, I can scale this image down towards the center point and use the entire image on my canvas. All right, now let's zoom back in so you can see what's going on here. Now with your stock artwork layer, I'm going to hit Control semicolon to get rid of my guides for now, just to hide them. Let's go ahead and set this layer to overlay. And let's go ahead and turn the opacity down to about 65%. So now let's go ahead and paint some color on top of this. You're going to create a new layer, and you're going to set that layer blending mode to color. And now let's paint some color on top of this. I'm going to start with an orange. So let's find a nice kind of yellow orange here. The hex value of this is F1A00. Click OK. And use a variety of soft paint brushes on the larger side. So if you right click, you can bring up the brush attributes pretty easily. And this brush looks like it's around 900 pixels. So let's go ahead and just paint on a couple splotches of color. And you want to vary up this brush in size. Let me actually redo this. I'm going to delete that. And you want to make sure that the hardness is set to 0. You want a very soft brush. So let's go through and paint those on again. and vary up your brush sizes. So use larger brushes and smaller brushes. I'm going to use a 1700 pixel brush there, and just kind of add some color where you see fit. Let's also add some other colors. I'm going to find a magenta, and if you know me, you know I like the color magenta. And let's also paint on some spots of magenta to really vary it up. And then let's also use kind of some lime green. So that color value is A8EE00. And again, this doesn't have to be precise. You're just kind of giving this background some color. And ooh, that was a nice effect what it did when the green and pink mix there. Kind of overlap it. And let's finally just add in some blue on top. So I'm going to find kind of a brighter cyan blue and do right kind of in the middle. And there you go. You have kind of a nice rainbow effect against that nebula to work with. So make sure you save out your document before your computer crashes inevitably like mine does. And here we go. All right. So now let's find a major shape to work with to be kind of the focal point of this image. I'm going to use a triangle. So I'm going to turn my guides back on by hitting Control semicolon. And I'm going to use the polygon tool over here. And I'm going to set the sides to 3. And the stroke, we don't want a stroke. And we want the fill to be, let's use a color picker. And let's pick a kind of a mid-range, just take a selection of one of the lighter blues in your artwork so far. Kind of like so. And you want to make sure that it is set to shape and not path or pixels. And go ahead and hold select from around the center, and you can drag out a rather large triangle. There we go. Now we're going to use many copies of this triangle to produce a bunch of different effects. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my guides again. And I'm going to create a new layer above our triangle. And I'm going to, with holding Control, click on your triangle thumbnail, and you will get a selection of that triangle. So let's go ahead and hide the triangle layer for now. And let's go to Select, Inverse. And with our empty layer above selected, let's go ahead and choose black for the foreground color. And we're going to kind of mimic an outer glow with the paintbrush tool. But we want it to be kind of random. We don't want it to be precise like an outer glow in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and just start to paint the edge here. As you can see, as I'm kind of going over this, it's painting the edge of the triangle, and this will give us a rather cool effect. So be very random with it. This will give us some pretty cool depth. So now when I hide the select box, you'll see that it kind of peels this triangle out of the background, which looks pretty cool on its own. So that's just a random technique there that you can use on a lot of stuff, a lot of different types of artwork. So now let's go ahead and take our triangle. So toggle it back on, and let's create a duplicate layer. And I'll toggle the layer back off so we have a duplicate, and hit Control T to transform, and hold Shift and Alt and just kind of scale this one down, and we're going to make kind of a border effect. So with your arrow keys, simply with your arrow keys on your keyboard, just simply cursor your arrow down until it looks like it's about center with the larger one. And let's set that one to screen. And let's turn the opacity down to about 70%. Looks good. Let's make another duplicate copy, and this will be our focal point. So we're going to make a duplicate of that triangle, Control T, and let's scale this one down. So it's about that size, about 75% of the original. And since these are still in a kind of a vector layer, you can double click the layer, and let's change the color to, let's go back to that magenta, rather bright. Let's change the layer mode to normal, and the opacity, we can leave it at 70. Let's go ahead and add a mask to this. So select your add a mask icon down here at the bottom, add layer mask, click that. You're going to use your paintbrush tool and make sure your foreground color is set to black, and use a large brush. You can just right click on the canvas and let's go to about 1700 pixels, and then let's just kind of get rid of this upper left hand side. So very easy, very subtly, just kind of get rid of a little bit of this triangle, just like so. Now let's create kind of an outer glow for this triangle. So remember, hold Control and select the triangle thumbnail. Select inverse. Let's create a new layer below your magenta triangle. And again, with your paintbrush tool, let's take a color swatch of kind of this pink here and maybe get a little bit of a brighter version. And now we're simply going to just do a simple blast of color around this one, much like we did the shadow for the larger triangle, and just we're going to create kind of an outer glow just to kind of give a little more depth. So if I hide the select box, you'll see this is looking pretty cool. All right, now let's get into kind of this electrical ring effect that we're going to apply to the whole thing. Above all layers, let's create a new layer. Turn your guides back on by holding Control and pressing the semicolon button. Now let's create a new layer. Oh, I'm sorry. Now let's go to our polygon tool and make sure polygon tool is selected, and let's set the sides to, let's go 11. Also, you don't want any fill at all. You want the stroke color to be white. And let's, for this first one, set the width of the stroke to 1.5 points. All right. Now from the center, hold Shift, and we're going to drag out a polygon shape that's a little less than the size of the larger triangle shape. So from the center, hold Shift and just drag your polygon out to about that size. Now let's go ahead and right click on that layer and rasterize that layer. Create a new layer above it. This time for the stroke, let's set it to 1 point. And let's do the same thing again around the same size. So hold Shift from the center point and drag out a layer. And this, you don't have to be, you don't have to copy identically to what I'm doing. This is very much, everybody's going to have slightly different artwork, which is what makes it cool. Hit Control T, and let's just rotate this layer just to kind of break it up and offset it. And you can see this kind of overlapping effect from one shape to another. So let's go ahead and rasterize that layer again. Let's do it one more time. Create another layer. Hold Shift from the center and drag outwards. Control T. And let's also rotate this layer to offset what will be kind of this electrical looking thing. Right click that layer and rasterize layer. Now let's go ahead and hold Shift and select those layers and Control E and merge them together. Now this is where I'm going to show you two different techniques to do this next effect depending on what version of Photoshop you have. I'll start with the CS6 version, and so what I want to do is make a copy of this layer. I'm going to hide one and show you the CS6 version. So now you can go under, for this blur effect, go under Filter, Blur, Tilt Shift, and this is by default you'll get a tilt shift look like this. What you want to do is kind of rotate this 45 degrees or a negative 45 degrees or close, and you want to leave the blur percentage to about 15 pixels, and you want to turn the distortion to maybe 2 and just simply hit return. And this creates a really cool effect where part of your kind of electrical field is real clear and sharp, and the rest is blurred out on the upper right and lower left sides. So this is a very cool and easy way to do it in CS6. If you have a lower version of Photoshop, let me show you how to do it kind of manually. So I'm going to hide this layer, and I'm going to turn on the duplicate layer we had before. And that layer, I'm going to create a copy of it. So one of these layers, let's go ahead and hide it. So we just see one of the copies. Now go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And probably around 9 pixel radius is what you want to use. So hit Return. Now let's add a mask. So add a layer mask, and with your paintbrush, we're going to mask out the areas that we don't want to be crisp. So if we want to mimic what we had before, let's go ahead and mask out the upper left, kind of like so, and the lower right, kind of like so. Now hold Control and select that mask, and you'll see that Photoshop will find the selection of that mask and the feathering and everything. Select Inverse. Go to your layer that you had hidden, toggle that on, select it, and click the Add Mask button. And you'll see we got pretty close to the tilt shift method. So let's go ahead and select both those layers and Control E. And this is the manual method. This is the tilt shift method. Pretty very, very similar. So depending on what version of Photoshop you have, you can do this in older versions or newer ones. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave my tilt shift version on. I'm going to create a copy of that layer. Control T. And I'm simply going to take this one and I'm going to slightly make it smaller, about 75% smaller. And I'm going to ever so slightly just rotate it just a tad. Like so. And I'm going to hold Shift, select them both, Control E, and merge them together. So now what I want to do is kind of make this almost look like it's going below, parts of it are going below the main triangle. So I'm going to kind of cursor it down to where my larger triangle is, and I think I'm going to hide the top and the bottom left hand side. So I'm going to hide this area up here and this area down here. So what you want to do is go back to your main polygon layer, and remember, hold Control and select that thumbnail. Now you can go ahead and toggle off the display and hide that that layer once again. Now if you go to Select Inverse, you can come up to your main kind of electrical looking circular effect and make sure that layer is selected, and then click the Add Mask icon once again, and you'll see that it's now, it looks like it's below everything. But we want to make parts of it look like it's coming above the triangle. So go ahead and select that mask, select your paintbrush, make sure your foreground color is set to black, and now we're going to, actually let's reverse this, we want this set to white, I'm sorry, and we want to paint on the areas that we want to come back into the image here. So let's go ahead and find a nice brush size, and then we can color back in some of this electrical feel, just like so. That gives it kind of a nice effect. Actually, let me undo that, and I'm going to just do this outside ring, and we'll do like here and here. So you do something like that, and you can just kind of paint it on and have bits and pieces of it overlap depending on what you want it to do or to look like. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of these layers, and I'm going to, all of the polygon layers, so select them all, and then I'm just going to kind of use my arrow keys and just kind of get it back to where I think a good center point is for everything, and save that out. And so far that's looking pretty cool. So let's do another kind of triangular effect with this outside triangle. So what we want to do is, with our original large triangle, let's create a duplicate of that, make sure it's turned on, Now let's go ahead and with the layer effects, let's add a stroke. And let's set the position to inside, the size to 2, and the color to white. Now under blending options, let's take the fill opacity and turn it to 0. Now right click that layer and select rasterize layer style. And you should just be left with the stroked outline. So create a copy of that layer, Control T, and just ever so slightly rotate it. We're doing kind of the same method that we did before. And I'm going to make one other copy of that rotated copy, and I'm going to, this one I'm going to scale it down ever so slightly and just rotate it just a hair more, just to kind of break it up a bit. In all those triangles, I'm going to hold Shift on those layers and Control E and merge them together. Now for CS6, I'm going to go ahead and run the tilt shift blur filter again, but you can also do the manual method. So I'm going to simply rotate this to where I think it kind of matches up with the other two, which now is around negative 36 degree angle. Hit return. Let it think. And there we go. We have kind of a nice effect here. I'm going to go ahead and turn the opacity down a bit because I don't want it to be too busy, but I just want it to kind of come into the artwork a little bit. Okay, so now what we want to do is add in some kind of diagonal line shapes to help break this up. So we're going to use the line tool. So make sure you select the line tool, and you want the fill color to be white. You don't need a stroke on it, and the weight should be 2 pixels. So let's go ahead and draw in 1, then you're going to have to zoom in and kind of connect the edges or the ends. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, and let's start kind of our main line here. Holding Shift, you can draw out a perfect 45-degree angle, and let's just do something right around there. Alright, let's zoom in so we can see what we're doing. And you're going to keep just drawing in this line by holding Shift so you get a variety of 45-degree and 0-degree and 90-degree angles. Say that 2 times fast. Okay, so find the end and hold Shift and just start drawing your lines. And we're just simply trying to end up towards the triangles. So there's no real science to this. Just kind of keep going. And when you hit an edge of the triangle, that might be a good point to go a different direction. Like that triangle here, I might follow it down a little bit. Might be kind of cool. There we go. And then one more into the triangle here. Let's go ahead and right click and rasterize that layer. And with the eraser tool, let's just with about a 350 pixel soft brush, let's just delete the end, kind of like that. So there we go. You're going to do this a few times. Let's zoom out and start another line. Pretty close. I can zoom in so I can see the ends. And you're just going to kind of do the same process. Just be very freeform with it. Just kind of, they can crisscross and overlap, or they can be totally independent of each other. Doesn't really matter. But you just want to kind of break it up. Maybe like so. And maybe here, I'll come straight across or something. All right. So right click on that layer, rasterize layer. Let's go ahead and grab your eraser tool and get rid of that end. And there you go. You have kind of a cool effect of these lines coming in. So let's go ahead and merge these lines together. Control E. And create a copy. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. 9 pixels is good. hit OK. Let's zoom out. Now you can see it looks like an outer glow kind of. Let's give it a mask, and let's go ahead and paint on some black, and with a larger soft brush, and just real quick we're going to get rid of the end here, so it kind of goes from a blur into the sharp, just kind of like what we did with the rings. So let's go ahead and add a mask to the blurred lines, and we're going to do that on the other end, but this time we don't want them to transition perfectly. We just kind of want to fade it out slightly. So I'm just going to kind of use a smaller brush and mask out this end over here, kind of like that. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and do another series of lines on the bottom right, and then I will be back to show you the rest of it. All right, so I've also added in a kind of a contrasting set of lines coming in the bottom right, just to kind of further pull your eye into the center here. One other thing that we're going to do, one of the last items, is go ahead and create a copy of your bright pink triangle. So grab that layer and create a duplicate copy. Now this layer, you're just going to simply turn the opacity down just a little bit. We're just kind of brightening things up, and select the mask again, and we're just going to kind of paint off a little bit more just on the top, but just to give the both layers a little bit more brightness. So let's go ahead and create one more copy of that layer, and with your direct select tool, Control T, and go ahead and hold Shift and Alt, and let's scale this triangle down a little bit. And we're also going to kind of rotate it, and this will be kind of a highlight effect. So we just want to kind of break up this series of triangles that we got going on. So maybe something kind of like that. And the opacity, turn this one up to about 90%, kind of like that. And there you go, it's looking pretty cool. Now the last step we're going to do, well, I'm sorry, second to last step, let's go ahead and add a kind of a vignette effect. So create a new layer above everything. And for this you want to zoom out a little bit more, and you want a nice big fat soft brush, and this is 1700 pixels, which will work just fine. And let's go ahead and select black as our foreground color. And let's just kind of go ahead and paint a corner over here. So I'm painting the top right corner. Now duplicate that layer, make a copy of it, edit, transform, flip horizontal, hold shift, and hold shift, I have auto select turned on, and drag it to the left hand side until you feel it snap. If you have snapping turned on, it works well right at this point. So Control E to merge those layers together, create another duplicate layer, edit, transform, flip vertical, drag this one down till it locks in the bottom, Control E, one more duplicate layer, edit, transform, rotate 90 degrees, it can be clockwise or counter, doesn't matter, Control E. That just gave us kind of a nice manual vignette effect, which looks kind of cool. So the last thing we want to do is create some little kind of highlights that hit these kind of electrical lines, and that can help really pull the piece in depth a little more. So above your shadow layer, create a new layer. Let's turn your guides back on, Control, semicolon. Let's zoom in, excuse me, way in. Grab your brush tool. Let's set the color to, let's do like kind of a, let's take a selection of this pink but set it almost to white, kind of like so. And right click with your brush tool, and we want to find a size that'll make kind of a nice glow to our kind of our pinpoint dot. So let's do 90 and just click once on the center. Now that layer, turn the opacity to 50%, and let's create another layer above that. Right click and let's create a new brush size that's around about half, so 40 pixels. And just with your center point, click one more. Now the opacity of that layer, let's turn it to 75. Let's do one more layer above, and this is going to be our main kind of highlight. So let's set it to, let's try 15 pixels, very, very small. And then just click once or twice. And that'll be, turn the guides off, and you can see we just created kind of like another star actually. So I'm going to save this real quick. Now feel free to make duplicates of this star shape and just kind of, let's see, first merge those layers together. There we go. And now you can just kind of drag it and have it sit on these lines here, and it's a nice kind of effect for the overall piece here. And you kind of want to pick edges, like it works well on curves, and also where two kind of elements cross like this. So right at the edge of that triangle looks kind of cool. Let me zoom out so you can see what's happening here. And I'm gonna do another one kind of towards the bottom here, which might look good. I don't know if I should do it there. Yeah, there looks good. And let's do one more kind of down here somewheres. These little details are really what makes it pop at the end. So one last thing I'm going to do is, I think these overall kind of rings, I'm going to turn the opacity down just a hair, if I can remember what layer they're on. So I'm going to turn the opacity down to about 85. And there you have it. It's a very cool little effect. It doesn't require anything like a tablet or much in the way of stock art or anything like that. And you can keep pushing it. You can kind of, another step you could do is actually darken the edges of this electrical kind of line that fall under the triangle. So you can actually use your burn tool and darken it up a little bit. Or actually what you could do, actually let me go ahead and show you this. So let's make a duplicate copy of our electrical layer, right? Go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. I'm going to make sure Legacy is turned on, and I'm simply going to turn the brightness down. And it looks like we're going to have to do this more than once. So Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. There we go. Okay, so now we already have a layer for it. So select, or we already have a mask for it. Select that mask. Let's make sure black is the foreground color, and with our paintbrush, let's paint on the areas that we want to be kind of bright white. So I'm just going to paint here because these edges are kind of, we want those to be a little bit dark. So I'm going to go kind of like this, and I'm just going to hit the edges above what would be above the triangle. So kind of like that. That helps kind of mimic lighting a little bit better. So okay, so with that, we're pretty much done. And like I said, you can use a variety of these techniques and make different art and do whatever you want. Try something other than triangle. Try overlapping squares or even circles or something, and see what happens. This electrical kind of effect, you can do this with any shape. We did this with what was an 11-sided polygon. You can use triangles. You can use something with multiple sides. Just the less amount of sides, the more you'll get kind of the electrical feel. If you turn up the amount of sides to like 50 or something, you're just going to end up with kind of a circle, which will look more like a circle. So you can vary it up and see what you come up with. All right, hope you like this. Hope you got some use out of it. And as I find more of these, I'll create some tutorials for them. And I can't speak, so that means it's time for me to quit. All right, take care. Bye.